Welcome to another podcast episode of Nuggets with Sauce, Thought Leadership for Thoughtful Leaders, presented by me, Michelle Arntz. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to yet another episode of Nuggets with Sauce. I am your host, Michelle Arntz, and I am beyond delighted, super hyped, stoked, whoop, whoop, because I have my friend Jared Gibson on here today. Jared, I know this is going to be a saucy episode with you, sir, as I have gotten to have the privilege of getting to know you over this year of our calendar, 2023. I've been super impressed with who you are and what you bring to the table, your very authentic, wonderful self. So I'm pumped that we're going to have this conversation for leaders together here. But as you know, we always kick off the program with a little intro. I never do job titles, so I just always ask, and you knew this was coming, Jared, what is your magic mojo in this world? What are you doing when you get out of bed every day that helps make the world a better place?
All right. So before I get to that, I want to say thank you, and the feeling is mutual. Love the podcast, so I was happy when you invited me on. So what gets me out of bed? So I'm going to go with we did in a previous life, our leadership team got together and everybody read What's Your Why, the Simon Sinek book, and we actually went through an entire leadership exercise where we all worked together to identify what our why is. So I hung it up next to my computer, that and a bunch of other things that are hung up all over the place, like messages. But my why is to bring gifts into the world through laughter and provide a spark of innovation so that the mindset is focused on nothing but positivity and growth. So that is my corny ass why. But that's me.
Corny that's ass. That's awesome.
It's kind of corny ass, but I live by it. That's who I am.
Hey, you know what? Embrace that because I think it's awesome, and I'm a big fan of Simon and the whole start with your why. So that segues us perfectly into the other question I always love to ask everybody who joins me here. Do you have a recommended read, watch, or listen for everybody?
Man, I got a lot, but I'll stick to one because of time. I will say, let's go with a read. I will say a book that I've read a few times now that I think is always timely is Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. That book is, it definitely is, it's so interesting because we talk about challenges that we have in life, and every day, there's new challenges and things that get us in the way of where we want to go. And he does an amazing job of going throughout world history and bringing up examples of people throughout world history that had these obstacles, these massive obstacles that were in their way, whether that's through war, whether that's through invention, whether that's through love, whatever that is. And he said that in the way that he tells the story is, and he's a stoic, so he's very, obstacle is the way, ego is the enemy type of personality. He tells how they overcame those obstacles to achieve success. So when we think about the shit that puts us in the corner all the time, and we always want to gripe and point and make excuses, and I can't do this, I can't do this. Like, I think back to, there's certain books that I look at and I'm just like, listen, if these guys did this, like, this is petty, this is small beans compared to what those guys went through. So figure it out, don't. I love it.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to check that out. That might have to go on my gift wish list, because I love history. So anytime I can learn lessons from history and how other people did it before us, that is an extra win in my book. So thank you. I recommend.
Yeah, incredible read, easy too, which is great. Once you start, it's tough to put it down.
Winner, chicken nugget dinner, right there. Okay, that is fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I am definitely going to check that out, because I think there's a lot to be said for. Yes, we like to bitch and moan and think how hard done by we are. My husband and I always like to say, first world problems is, we're yammering away about this or that. But, put it in perspective sometimes when you look at, and don't you kind of feel sometimes everything old is new again?
Yes. 100%.
It's been done before. So that sounds fantastic. With all that said, I know we want to dive into some great nuggets for our listeners. I'm thinking we're going to be super saucy here today because I don't know, like you can turn the heat up as much as you want here on what you say and how you say it.
Let's do it. I can't even finish a candy fireball. My wife gives me shit all the time that I'm a wimp when it comes to hot sauce. So I'll stick to barbecue or teriyaki today, but we'll make it spicy.
Hey, that's a nice, warming, comforting kind of a thing too, with just a little kick, which is all right. I know I'm a baby when it comes to actually eating hot sauce is not my thing, but spitting verbal hot sauce around, I'm pretty okay with that.
There you go. I'm game for that.
I get pretty fired up about things. So what are you seeing out there? I mean, you have such an interesting background and such interesting expertise, and where you've really stepped out this year, I know, as an entrepreneur starting a new business. Share with us a nugget or two, because I know we're going to have more conversations in this down the line, but what's the stuff that you're seeing out there that you're like, God, if people in leadership roles were just thinking a little differently or doing it a little bit better, here's what we could really, we really could get those obstacles out of the way and move ahead.
Yeah. So it's funny because kind of all of this really, there's multiple different angles that I can go at with how I answer that question. But I think that at the end of the day, and there's a reason why Merriam-Webster's word of the year is authentic, right?
Oh yeah.
It's because of everything that's going on with AI. It's everything that's out there right now. So I'm a huge believer, and I've had both sides of this, of leadership leading with vulnerability and their authentic self, right? I think that there's the days of being a leader that lives with that like wall up where they're not vulnerable, they don't lead with curiosity, like all this stuff, like
I'm never wrong.
Yeah, it's like every leader should have a mirror put in front of them, and like they should look at themselves first, because I still think that there's a large group of people out there that don't look at themselves first. Like if there's something that happens, they immediately point the finger, or and people don't want to go into battle with people like that on a daily basis with a job. Like, right, I loved, in a previous life, I loved my leadership team, the people that I worked with. I woke up with a purpose. I got to go, I use the word battle loosely, but I got to go to battle with people that I loved working with, right? And it was like, I knew, like, it wasn't just letting, like, if I wasn't going full all the time or most of the time, I wasn't just letting like this person, I was letting this person down. Like, these are people that like I depended on and they depend on me, right? So, and the reason that we all did that is because we all led with vulnerability. We all led with like our heart. Like, that's just who we were as a group. And I think that's something that's missed still today in society, like leadership just not opening up and kind of being up in their ivory towers, leading from above, not being on the
offices. Yeah, where I mean, I don't know if it's as common as it used to be, but it shocks me when I sometimes talk to folks who worked at, and I worked in some pretty big companies, but I've run across people who worked in places where like you couldn't even get on the same floor as the top leadership team unless you had a special invitation or your key card had been specially programmed. And I'm like, what the hell is that about? Like that seems insanely foreign to me. But I'm sure it's still happening. And
it's happening. I have stories of it happening.
And then they live in this bubble where it's like, and they wonder why, like, how come you don't know what everybody else is up to? Well, because to your point, they're up in the ivory tower. And I think that authenticity thing and that vulnerability is so important. I mean, I think battle, it's a loose analogy, but like, hey, we want to know, have you got my back? Or are you going to turn around and shoot me? So to speak, at the first sign of something not panning out or whatever, you made a mistake. Oh, well, I mean, let's go back to our friend Simon Sinek for a moment here. And I have this I've got all these nice little Post-its around my monitor to remind me every day of important things. Like you've got your why on the wall. And a quote that I have of his, be the leader you wish you had. Be the leader you wish you had.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely, like, I don't think it could be said any better than that.
No. And like, if we have to get our mirror out and look at that, then let's do it. Yeah, I say that all the time to people. Like, one of the more challenging things in my line of work is getting leaders to look at themselves in the mirror and say, oh shit, I'm part of the problem. But you know what's awesome about that? You get to be part of the solution too.
Exactly.
You know, you can do
Yeah.
something different tomorrow than you did today.
Yeah. So you asked the question of like, what are the things that right now are frustrating or that I'm seeing that are out there? I would say
Yeah.
that is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
Leaders just need to, in today's day and age, especially with everything going on in the world, like leading with vulnerability. The other piece of that, because I'm in the sales and marketing world, and my background is in sales and marketing, is the way that buyers buy today is very, very different than the way that buyers bought pre-COVID, right?
Yeah.
And that was only 3-4 years ago, right? So
Yeah.
I think that a lot of sellers today are still of the mindset that they're in control, right? So, which meaning that I have to sell this person on what I'm doing, as opposed to the buyer's in control of the entire situation. If the buyer doesn't want to have the conversation with you, or the buyer wants to do all of their research and get 85% of the way and then bring you in, you have to go by what the buyer wants nowadays. So the other piece of it too, on the buy and sell side, is that there's a lot of noise out there today. There's a lot of noise, like in the LinkedIn space and email space. Like, how do you get in front of your ideal like persona? Like, how do you get in front of your ideal buyer? And I think
people aren't even thinking about that. They don't even know who that is. You don't even know who you're trying to sell to, which means you can't talk to them. I mean, I know I struggled through that for a while, where I'm like, you know, and I'm still re-clarifying from time to time, who is it I'm trying to serve? Who do I even want to work with?
Yeah. And I guess I would ask you, how are you figuring that out?
Oh, turn the tables on me, don't you?
Spicy.
Yeah, well, a little vulnerability. I'm working on some of that, you know, but figuring that out. I mean, a couple of key places I go to as I think about who have I had the best, most enjoyable experiences with. That's a key indicator. You know, I'd like to have more of this kind of experience because I had it with a client. So that's definitely a key place I go. You know, what kind of engagements have I had? What kind of conversations? What kind of partnerships have I had? Because that's really where you want to replicate it, you know, and then think about the factors that wrap around that, whether it's personality wise, or like the kind of business, or the, you know, the business unit, or whatever. But that's my first go-to, is who have I enjoyed working with? That undoubtedly means that I'm going to enjoy working with other people like that. You know, and then the flip side is, you think about, you know, it's kind of like dating in a weird way, you know, but it's like, who do you not want to, you know, what are the things that I never want to touch that again? You know, but knowing what you don't want, I think, is as critical as what you do. But I agree. I think there's a lot of folks who are, you know, and this is that time of year, maybe if your fiscal starts in January, like now's as good a time as ever to think about, do you want to continue down the line with all that noise, all that chatter, all that possibly misappropriated time and energy that you've got, talking to the wrong people, looking for the wrong people, not knowing how to get your message across in a very crowded space. And I love what you said too. I think that's very important to realize, like, so many things about pandemic completely changed how we should approach things. And I think in many respects for the better, but it's disruptive. So you got to deal with disruption. But, you know, I know as a consumer as well, I don't like a hard sell. Don't just come in trying to sell people on stuff right away. Yeah. Or is that just me?
No, it's not you. I mean, listen, I started a business on that, in that mindset, right? It is not, it is like, again, our link, we have a LinkedIn business, but it's not pitch slap. It's not connect and immediately start pitching. It's like
that pitch
slap. How do you warm up an introduction? How do you warm up these leads through LinkedIn? And that's through pulling down the wall of kind of the outsider looking in, that wall of spam, right? That's a lot of people view that as spam. And if you can get in there and you can authentically connect and engage and provide value and build trust on LinkedIn, right?
Through
That
authenticity, because you're not going to build trust if you're faking.
Yes.
Yeah.
The mindset shift cannot go. So we always say like the mindset shift on LinkedIn needs to happen. You need to go from being a seller to being a networker. How can you network on LinkedIn? And that's what LinkedIn is ultimately. It's a business networking platform, right? And if you know what, if your end game is to get revenue out of that, great. Like, but you just need to be strategic in how you go about getting that revenue, right? You can't immediately do the spray and pray methodology of connect and pitch. It just doesn't work anymore. It worked 10 years ago. It did. And a lot of people made a lot of money doing it, but it's just a different space than we are today.
Yeah. And by the way, for a few outliers out there who probably aren't listening to this, but just in case, no, LinkedIn is not a dating place. Knock that shit off.
Wait a second. Do you know somebody? Is this?
Oh, I've had people hit on me on LinkedIn, and it's really creepy and weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need a like. That's phenomenal. I think that's
seriously weird. I think there's quite a number of women out there who will echo my sentiments that like you really like. This was not the platform that you ever thought this was going to happen on, but it does. Oh yeah.
Interesting. I get hit on all the time on LinkedIn.
Times. My favorite.
That's a lie. I want to make sure that everybody knows that was a lie, what I just said.
I'm telling you though, like when somebody's, going down that road, my quick shutdown line was, they'd say, I just want to get to know you and talk. And it's like really smarmy the way they're coming across. And I'm just like, that's great. Because I love to talk about my work and my business. Didn't hear from them after that, thank goodness. But I'm just saying, like, but it's that, I love what you're saying. Bring your authentic self, change that mindset. But LinkedIn, I'm kind of joking, not joking when I say like, but don't cross the line and be a weirdo about, we don't authentically need to know everything about you.
And that is that line is very difficult for people to understand where that line is, right? And that's the one thing that we've seen. Our clients is that, we've had to kind of pull back the reins and be like, hey, listen, like saw that you did this, like maybe try doing this instead. Like, our business is literally a do it for you LinkedIn strategy for companies. And it's you have to be human. You have to be authentic. And people struggle with that. They don't know where that line is. I'm like, am I hard selling? Is this not conversational? And it's like, I always say like, is this say it out loud before you send anything. Say it out loud. And if it's not how you talk, then don't hit send on it. Right. Or how would you say? Yeah.
I love that. That is a brilliant nugget. I want to repeat that. Say it out loud before you click send, because if it doesn't sound like you, it's really you. And I think sometimes too, hearing things is different than reading it. Like, I mean, the tone is all stripped out. There's nothing like, this is why we have emojis, people, because like the tone's no longer there. I don't know. Do you mean this or not? And I think sometimes we have a disconnect in our brain about like, seeing it is one thing, hearing it can be very different. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, it looked okay on paper, but it sounded weird out of my mouth.
Yeah.
So excellent nugget to share. And, what is your voice? And we need to learn what our voice is. I think a lot of us don't know how to be authentic without, to your point, crossing the professional line. Now I'm of course, the algorithm's feeding me all kinds of interesting things, but I'm seeing a lot of buzz out there too about how LinkedIn got weird. Because people, I think to some degree, maybe overshared and got a little too authentic in some respects. I don't know. But
I would agree with that to a certain extent. But at the same time, because we live in this remote hybrid world, like this is the shit that happens on a daily basis with people. It's not we're in the office anymore 5 days a week. Like if my kid's home sick from school and I'm on a podcast right now, like our bathroom is right on the other side, our downstairs bathroom right on the other side of this wall. My 5-year-old son, I've been on important business calls. That sounds so dumb to say, important business calls. See, that's not something I would type out in a note. I've been on important calls, and my son, who's 5, has yelled, and everybody on the call heard it. I'm done. I pooped. So that means that I have to say, I'll be right back. And I have to go in and I have to wipe his ass and then come back out. Right. So
it's very humanizing.
But this is where we are right now. So I think that there's certain things that people post their sports cars and how much money they make. Like that's super douchey. Nobody gives a shit about any of that. Like, this is, if you do this strategy, you'll be able to buy this car. Like, that's dumb.
Yeah.
But my son going to the bathroom next door, like, that's where we are in society right now. Like, people don't look down on that anymore like they did 5 years ago.
No. And that's that. I think that goes back to what you were saying too. And this is a common thread I feel through, and I know this is going to keep coming up in a lot of my podcasts and conversations, and rightfully so, is that authenticity piece again. This is a real lived experience for a lot of people. I mean, I'm not a parent, but I can completely empathize. I got a dog. So although my dog does not announce certain things, and usually she's, but weird stuff happens with pets and children and roommates and spouses, and so I think that element of being your authentic self and not denying or pretending like this is not my life, or I think that does help us build those relationships and that trust, because it's like, oh, any fellow parent would be like, oh, I so get what that's like, that could have been me easily, or whatever. So I think that's very humanizing, and I think that is really important. And so that whatever you're doing in your dynamic, when you're trying to sell or promote your business, your service, your idea, your leadership, the fundamental of that seems to me comes back to, you said the word trust. And it takes time to get to know, like, and trust somebody. So if you're going to wallop me, I like that pitch slap idea. That's a great term. I'm going to run with that. But if you're going to pitch slap me right out of the gate, I don't want to deal with you. If 3 seconds after you've introduced yourself, what you're trying to do is sell me your thing, your whatever. I'm just speaking for myself, but that's a giant turn off for me. And I just feel that, if we're really going to get ahead and be really good leaders of ourselves and others, it's like, you have to lead by example. And that means be relationship driven. I don't try to, yes, people ask me on the first, introductory call. Of course, I'm sure at some point we're going to talk about, well, the big question, what do you do? And what we mean by that is, what do you do to make money? Okay. But I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm just trying to explain to you, this is what I get out of bed for every day. But if you're just going to sit there and say, hey, I, 10x people in 5 weeks doing whatever with my great platform, and that's your way of saying hello. Yeah, you're right. Not good.
And that there was a time that I think that absolutely worked, right? And people like I said before, people made a lot of money, but the space has become a lot more crowded today than it was a few years ago. And like, especially on LinkedIn, like, LinkedIn, there's still, I believe, we're not even at the tip of the iceberg on the potential opportunity that LinkedIn can be.
Nope.
I think it's the status like 3% of people post once a month on LinkedIn. I think that's the stat. And then less than 1% actively post on LinkedIn, meaning multiple times a week. And then out of 300 million people in the US, 16% of that group log in every day to LinkedIn. That's still a massive number and a massive potential share of voice opportunity, right? So if it's done the right way, there is a real good opportunity on LinkedIn, but you can't treat it like, I think I've explained this to you before. Like, you have to treat it like an in-person networking event. When you're at an in-person networking event, you don't walk right up to somebody and immediately start pitching them. Hey, my name's Jared. Like, here's what I do. I'm pitching you. Like, that turns people off. It pisses people off. You walk up and you lead with curiosity. You ask questions about them. You talk about them, right? You get them to the point where they ask you what you do, and then you can engage them about what you do.
You're a sneaky little devil. You put it, that little nugget, lead with curiosity. I had to catch out that nugget, the big dunk of teriyaki or barbecue, whichever you want on that sauce there, because that is brilliance. Lead with curiosity. Make it more about the other person than about you.
Yes, 100%. And that goes back to also leadership. So I would say that about leadership. I had one of the best leaders that I've had, and right before before this company, before we did Outworks, he was always asking about others. He was always leading with curiosity. His door was open, anybody could come in, and he would always ask them questions about themselves. He never talked about himself, never wanted to talk about himself. Like, he wanted to make sure everybody else was okay around him. And that a lot of that rubbed off on me. And like, that's how leaders should operate, right? We talked about vulnerability and authenticity, but a lot of it, all that kind of comes back to leading with curiosity.
Kind of like, again, there I go. We're just loading up Simon Sinek. And by the way, neither one of us get any kickbacks from him, although he is amazing. But, one of the other things he talks about is leaders eat last. Check in on everybody else, like make sure the other person's okay before you worry about yourself, and again, that turn off of, making it all about you. And again, we all have to check ourselves in the mirror from time to time on that one. I think that's very real, but you're not going to get very far ahead in the ways that you probably want to.
Yeah.
Carrots and sticks, but it's like way easier to lead with carrots and just say like, hey, I want people to feel like they, I want you to really want to be here. I want you to trust me as the person in charge. And how do you trust yourself in that role to also say, and the trust has to be mutual to be able to say, oh crap, I screwed up, or we didn't get this right, or whatever. And I'm going to own part of that too. And I'm not going to play the blame game and point fingers and yell and scream and moan and groan about my lot in life, but just say, hey, something didn't go the way that it was supposed to. Why don't we rally together? And if you're the one who did it, own it. Yeah. And I know but again, this goes back to, we're not making safe spaces in the work world to do so. This is a culture problem. This is a societal culture problem. This is a business culture problem. Would you agree? Yeah,
for sure. It's, and it all starts at the top.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. If there is an issue at the top, right, that everybody, like, there's only so many band-aids you can put on it. Like I'm going to keep opinions to myself on certain things, but like I've seen it recently where it is like, there's great people that work for certain companies, like great people, but they're not happy with their job.
No.
Right. They're not happy. Like when you are with a company and you don't wake up with a purpose to go to work that day, then you need to start looking for another company to work for.
That's a tough dang day. Yeah. And I think that's, part of that whole, we're hearing a lot of, stuff about burnout. And I've argued for a while now that really the lead indicator in my world of burnout is being tasked with doing something over and over and over again that really is either not in your wheelhouse to do or just really brings you no enjoyment whatsoever. That's a lead indicator of burnout. You're exhausted by having to either be somebody or do something that you really aren't.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to be counting all day, oh my God. Like, first of all, it would be a disastrous mess for anybody who had me doing it. But like asking me to do that all day, my authentic self, I suck at that stuff. If you ask me to do that, I mean, I have the privilege now being my own boss. I can walk away from things. And I've already been in a space to tell some clients, 2024, I will no longer do certain services. And the reason why is I realized along the way, this stuff was burning me out. This is not where I shine. This is not where I can do it, but it's exhausting for me to engage at that level. So lucky me, I get to say, no more. I will connect you with somebody who loves that stuff.
Yeah. And if you think about this, that's your leading indicator, right? How many bad lagging indicators are there then?
Right. Yeah.
Bad work, bad culture. There's so many other lagging indicators that come from that burnout, just the burnout piece.
Right.
But then the tentacles stretch for lagging indicators.
And the cost, I say to people, I'm in waste management, just not the kind you think of, but I'm not really joking because there's so much waste that comes from the mismanagement of ourselves and our human capital resources, whatever you want to call them, our people, when we don't recognize, and again, back to authentic self, back to building trust in relationships, back to all those kind of scary things that for the longest time we weren't supposed to touch, but in reality, actually unleash the best in everybody.
Yeah.
I agree. If you're miserable, who cares? I mean, yes, it's scary to let go of the paycheck if that's what's driving you, but all the money in the world ain't going to make you happy. And we can prove it because we have a lot of celebrities who are miserable and very screwed up people and have a boatload of money.
Yeah. I just posted, it's funny, I just posted today on LinkedIn about leaving a job for money. And I realized very quickly, 2 days into the new job, that I made a terrible decision. And I laid out everything that we just talked about as to why I made the so yeah, I agree.
And when you're leading people, for those of you who are watching, listening, if you're leading people, here's the flip lesson to that is throwing more money at it isn't going to fix it. What your employees are looking for, what your team members are looking for. Yes, let's be honest, a paycheck matters. We should give everybody a dignified living wage and compensate them fairly for what they're doing. That's just table stakes. But outside of that, throwing more money at people isn't going to make them happier. It isn't going to give them, to your point, that sense of purpose. That's not what they, get fired up and get out of bed for, is thinking about like, what's my salary this year?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't connect them to your customers. That's totally, forget that. Go after everything else but the money, because, the stats are telling us that, the vast majority of people, throwing money at the equation is the last thing on earth you need to do. Throw your time,
money is
energy,
still
and effort
important.
at it.
Money is still important,
Of
right? But it
course.
shouldn't be the only
No.
thing, for
When
sure.
people are quitting you for $1 more an hour.
Yeah.
I remember working at a place one time where, I am not making this up, people in the break room were literally talking about applying for a job down the road for 25 cents more an hour.
That's not a money problem. That's a culture problem at that
Exactly. Right?
Mhm.
Exactly. Like, it's all these other things. It's how your leaders make you feel. And, otherwise, what? We're just hiding out in the top corner. And again, go back to that trust thing. What kind of trust and relationships are you building if people can't even get on the same floor as you, or can't get in and talk to you?
Yeah.
You're off in this special bubble over here. That's nobody
Yeah.
wants, to your point earlier, nobody wants to go into battle when the generals are behind the lines arguing about who's got peach ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
No thanks.
That's a good nugget. That's a good analogy.
I kind of stole that from Dances with Wolves, to be perfectly honest with you, because weirdly enough, my brain works this way. There's an early scene in the film where they're sitting around waiting to figure out what's going to happen in a battle. And the one soldier very succinctly puts it, here's what's going on. And the generals are behind the lines wondering about their peach ice cream.
I haven't seen that movie in years.
I don't know, that moment stuck with me somehow, that I was like, the further you are away from the front, in a manner of speaking, the less connected you are to what's going on, which also means leaders can be less connected to their customers, which are the whole reason you got a business in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
Yeah.
peach ice cream.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Crazy what sticks in my head, but crazy that, that makes perfect sense. We've got to, I love that the word of the year is authentic, or authenticity. 100%. And
It
again,
makes sense with everything with AI. I mean,
yeah,
which is a whole
that's a whole other episode.
episode of conversation. But yeah, it's I think it's AI, just to kind of really quickly, I think there's so much opportunity out there with AI, but I also think there's a lot of bad shit that could come with it if it's not kind of bottled up here shortly.
Well, to quote from yet another film, if I may, Jurassic Park, this time, Dr. Malcolm points out, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
So we have to kind of think about, are we going to let that puppy out of the yard, and how easy is it going to be to get it back in again once we've got it? And what do we use it for? Again, there's so many things to think about, and we'll have to have another conversation and unpack that one further for sure. But we really got to think about, what are we using it for? And even within, the space that we've talked about today, what are you using your voice for? What are you using your LinkedIn for? What are you using your authenticity for? It's always a double-sided coin, right? We can use it for really great purposes, and we can use it, we can get people's trust and then betray it.
Yep.
Or we can get people's trust and really have people who love us and care about us and are all the way in with us, and they become some of our best employees. They become some of our best customers, business partners, you name it. Or we can flip that coin the other way and say, I'm just going to be a dick about stuff and take advantage of it. And well, you'll get what you put in for it,
Sure. For sure.
So it's not that it's good or bad, but I think in all these things, we have to think about, in our leadership spaces, what am I doing? Am I doing it for the betterment of myself and others, or is this hurting myself and or others? And if it's hurting, why are we doing it?
Yeah.
Or why are we doing it that way?
Money.
Yeah, well,
What it comes down to, that's the
yes.
end all be all.
Usually ends up being an awfully expensive fix, though, when it's focused on money.
True.
You can't buy trust.
No.
You can't buy appreciation, you know, to a certain degree, maybe, but
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many things that you just said you can't buy trust. And now my head goes into 50,000 examples of people that absolutely have bought trust with a lot of money. But we don't need to go down that path.
Well, I'm not one of those people who yet has that kind of money to go around buying trust, and probably most of the people who are watching or listening to us,
Yes.
we're not on that ship.
No, I am not either. I'm not.
So well, now you'll just have to make note of that. We're gonna have to unpack that one too. But yeah, anyway. This has been an absolutely fab conversation with you, Jared. I've appreciated this so much. You have shared some fabulously delicious nuggets today. I appreciate it. And I think the sauce was just right.
Good. Yeah. I always enjoy the conversation.
Awesome. Absolutely. Well, we're going to have you back again. In the meantime, everybody, thank you so much for joining us again on Nuggets with Sauce, and we'll see you on an episode again soon. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Nuggets with Sauce. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe so you get notified with new episodes as they come out. In the meantime, focus on setting yourself up for success and others too.